So guys, welcome to episode 5. I can't believe how quickly 5 weeks have gone. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the impacts that we have with lighting on bats, birds and insects, really anything that's flying in the sky. And we're going to look at how they are impacted and where we really shouldn't be placing lighting. Stay tuned. So if you put illumination near a roost, what will happen is the bats will either delay coming out of the roost and therefore feed for a shorter time, and then the young become malnourished, or even the adult bats themselves, or they'll just won't leave the roost, so they'll become entombed and then they'll eventually die. They can also abandon the roost entirely and just never return because of the lighting. So the buildings we're looking out for bats that typically roost in are typically quite old buildings, those that have been abandoned. I know that there's certainly some locally to us that are just old farm buildings that have not been occupied for 20-30 years plus and have just fallen into disrepair and make perfect roosts for bats. So lighting really does want to be avoided around those areas. So other areas we're looking at to avoid lighting is anywhere we've got rivers and streams, any ends of hedgerows, grassland that's not maintained, edges of woodland. So anywhere where we have these areas, we want to give ourselves buffer zones. So let's say that the woodland ends where this pole is. We'll, for example, want to give ourselves, say, 10 metres of space between the edge of that woodland before we start to bring in any lighting areas where the illumination has spilled over. So I don't mean 10 metres then you can have lights, I mean 10 metres and that's the edge of the spillover of the lighting that you're providing. So that's something to keep in mind. So we want those buffer zones so that we've got a nice bit of dark space to give us corridors for those bats to fly. The other thing that happens is with any lights, so what often happens with insects is where we have lighting that say is, well, if it's high up facing down or even across or upwards, you'll find that the insects will start flying around the light, and you'll see this commonly. I'm sure you've seen it many times before. For example, they're expecting to see the moon on their right hand side, and so they keep flying normally, using the moon as their navigation point. They're flying and thinking, oh yep, the moon's up on the right hand side, I can keep going in that direction. But when they go past and then all of a sudden the light moves, they go, oh right, I'm going to turn. And so this is how you see that the insects keep coming back around to the light constantly. And then where this causes an issue with not just the insects but also bats and bird species is that the bats typically will be hunting insects, and so the light is attracting the insects, and so the bats are trying to get to the insects but they don't really like the light. If they do start to hunt the insects that are around the lights, which is real easy pickings for them, which is great, you'd think would be great, but then the other issue is that the reason that they hunt at night typically is because they're trying to avoid birds, because many birds prey on bats. So we have this impact of where we've got the birds that are now awake longer because of the lighting. Now they're hunting during the night when they normally hunt during the day. The bats are under the lights, so now the birds can hunt the bats. So you can see there's like kind of this whole issue that we're causing by providing this lighting that's going to mean that we're going to lose more bat species and really impact birds and insects too. So the other thing we want to avoid is any lighting that produces any UV. So we're looking at fluorescent, metal halide. Now there's been some really interesting studies on the colour of light and how it impacts bat species. So green and white light significantly impacts bat species. Red light doesn't seem to impact bat species nearly as much. So as you can tell from when we're going warm white, we're going 2700K and warmer. What happens is as we go from 2700K to 2000K, the spectrum becomes more orangey red, and so because we're going towards that end of the spectrum, we're impacting the wildlife species less. So if you're unsure as to whether or not your site may have bat species or similar, then you need to contact an ecologist. An ecologist will be able to come out and do a survey, or they may have access to existing surveys that will show whether or not there are any species that you may impact present on your site. If that's the case, and if you have to then prove that your lighting is not going to cause any impact, it may be as simple as just covering what you're going to do in terms of your glare guards, your baffles, pointing everything downwards, and your illumination levels. But it may go as far as providing a lighting contour plan where we actually detail the lumen output of each light on the ground, or even a vertical one showing spillover, to prove you're compliant. Thanks very much for sticking with us to episode 5. Really appreciate it, guys. So I hope you learned a lot from this episode. If you did, please give it a like, put some comments in the box below, and if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at some more downward lighting, a couple of other different options and what we can achieve. And then after this, we'll probably be switching over to an installation style video where we start looking at installation techniques. So that'll be pretty much the end of the Dark Skies scheme for now. But whenever I get any more new information, anything that you guys feed to me, typically that's how it works, I will then add to Dark Skies video series. Anyway, have a lovely day. We'll see you soon. Bye.